A cultura constrói as memórias que preservamos e os futuros que idealizamos. Cultura transcende barreiras, conecta corações, transforma realidades. Acreditar na energia que vem da cultura é acreditar que as histórias transformam os palcos, os ritmos e os cantos desse país. São nessas histórias que encontramos a alma e a diversidade de um povo. Celebramos essa diversidade, celebramos cada cor, cada voz, cada sorriso e cada emoção. A cultura é reflexo dos nossos sonhos. Investimos nesses sonhos há mais de 60 anos, porque acreditamos que a energia que vem da gente é a energia que impulsiona vidas. Shell, energia que vem da cultura. Onde tem cultura, a vaga está. Um poder coletivo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. Onde toca um instrumento, um futuro desperta. Nas trocas de saberes, sonhos e oportunidades se concretizam. Dos projetos que todo mundo conhece, aos que todo mundo precisa conhecer, é valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Dizer que o Brasil é gigante não é nenhum exagero, mas um país desse tamanho não se move sozinho. Ele conta com mais de 200 milhões de gigantes, como eu e você. Gigantes que saem cedo de casa todos os dias, com força, dedicação, coragem, pelos trilhos, estradas ou aeroportos. Gigantes que não diminuem diante dos desafios, que não têm medo de distâncias, nem do longo caminho até os sonhos acontecerem. Por isso, só uma gigante como a CCR poderia estar ao lado dos brasileiros no desafio de mover este país. CCR, 25 anos. Mover o Brasil para gigantes.
Bom dia a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here once again at Floop, at Circo Voador, with such a beautiful audience. I am Amanda Gabriela, I'm an MC of this festival, and I feel very honored to be here with you for one more day full of activities, lectures, and shows, and all good things that we have prepared for you throughout the year. I'm gonna make some observations right now. Behind you, you're gonna find the company responsible for the simultaneous translation. You have the devices as well. You have to leave your ID or document.
All Orthodox tables have simultaneous translations into Portuguese and English. They will have headphones from the counters at the back.
So I'm gonna start this day, and I know we're all here. We want to hear what these girls have to say about their studies, their lives, and of course we're gonna have beautiful experiences with them. So let's start our schedule today with the fundamental book with this biographical dictionary about the history of Afrodiasporic women in partnership with Channel Futura, who is broadcasting our activities and has almost 1 million subscribers. That's what we want, to tell our story from ourselves, from our perspective. Our discussion today is about the importance of the writing as a means of preservation of Black women memories. What are the biggest issues, biggest challenges faced by Black women writers, like Conceição Evarista, Esperança Garcia, Mariana Preta Corá, and Salusti are in this dictionary. So let's talk now to the writers and the authors of these entries. We invite Jennifer dos Santos, Iraneide Silva, Marley Silva, and Maria Lima for this table, Escrevivências, Escritoras, Escrevivências, writers and written experiences. Good afternoon. Be all welcome to this academic Quilombo. And first of all, sorry for my Portuñol. We're gonna, dive a little bit into the life and work of all these writers that left marks with her words. So the questions we have here for the girls, the first one is, how was the process of writing and choosing this writer, this author, and what will be the legacy or the door that she leaves to the communities and to the academic field? Because we are in the academic field, and I'm talking about borders, And the last questions, what's the knowledge, the Afrodiasporic knowledge? So I'm going to invite Renata Tavares Brito Farali, who is going to talk about Carolina Maria de Jesus. Good afternoon. I am Renata. I'm a professor. I'm professor at the Department of Education. I'm not one of the researchers here. And I'm gonna start this panel thanking all the women, girls, old women that are here. And on your behalf, I greet my ancestrality and I ask permission to speak. And I wish I'll be able to communicate a little bit of this experience. And if I can say some names, I'm gonna say Thais, Marinho, Reginalda Simone, two women who opened the path for me for this experience. And I'll try not to be emotional about it, It's impossible. Our entry, it's an honor to write about Carolina Maria de Jesus, the different roles of a Black writer. And we want to play some jokes with the world roles, because beyond the role of woman, little girl, curious, speculator, determined, a Black little girl that became a great writer, recognized in the whole world. And in the 60s, she became famous in more than 40 countries and caused a fuss everybody wondering where would this girl be coming from, what she was writing. So in the beginning, when you ask about the big legacy that Carolina de Maria Jesus left, is that she said, all of us can write. All of us are able to write about our stories as denounced, because we have freedom and competence for that, regardless of the place we are right now. And she showed us how this is possible with her writings. And Quarto de Despejo is the most famous one. My re-encounter with Maria Carolina Jesus, it was the moment when I wrote my greetings of my PhD thesis, and I received a message from Rosinalda Simone saying that, Renata, we are trying to open a path to build a network of women all over the country, and I wanted to invite you to come on board with us. And I said, oh my God, me? I was, researching on education and human rights from the dialectic historical materialist, because where I was studying at that moment, it wasn't allowed to study issues that were ongoing because we didn't have references and sources. So cultural studies were not welcome. And my supervisor said since the beginning, you cannot research about the reality. You cannot research on social cultural studies and ongoing studies and ongoing reality. So I was, looking for documents, researching on documents regarding education. And when Rosinalda invited me, I considered that I had some sort of re-encounter with Carolina Maria de Jesus. And when I was writing my greetings, I thanked all the Marias in my life, my great-grandmother, my grandmother from both sides, mother and father, they are Marias. And I said, oh my God, I suggested other names. We have a lot of reference of Black women around us. I come from Goiás, which is a very small city with less than 20,000 inhabitants. It's a historical city with almost 300 years of history. She was the root for the Bandeirantes. So we have a city that is considered a historical heritage for the humanity. And we have a Quilombo built by the community, by the city. And I had some names in my mind, and by talking with Rosinalda and open the dialogue to other fields, because Rosinalda said, come and bring others. People you would like to indicate, to point. And when I was talking about the names, I suggested some names, and Rosinalda brought Carolina Maria de Jesus, and I, got a little bit scared because it's a really huge responsibility to write about someone who didn't have this very happy ending. And it's very interesting for us to talk about stories that do not have a happy ending. It's important to look at it and understand that we don't always have happy endings. And I feel so sad about it, 100 years ago, 90 years ago. And we're dealing with issues that we cannot solve yet, such as hunger, which is incredibly represented by her. She is able to talk about hunger, and we feel like, we feel it so intensively. And I didn't have the memory of the first time I read Quarto de Despejo, so we were invited to dig into her biography. And at that moment, when I was writing my PhD thesis, and I thanked all the Marias that came before me and allowed me to be here and meet you guys in my life, and gave new concepts and significance to all these experiences, new meanings to these experiences, and being in this stage talking about this book. My writing happened within this context of pandemics. I am a professor, and during the pandemics, our work was intensified. And coupled with this professor, during my work as a professor, all my activities at home. And we talk about this, about the different roles that women can, perform during her life, and about the work and life of Carolina Maria de Jesus. And I felt like during the pandemics, we were isolated, really. But this was an experience of aquilombamento, of building a quilombo that was certified here during this moment. And it gave me a lot of strength. I felt so alone at that moment. And I talked to Adri and she said, "Oh, you sure? We have so many things to do. We're so busy because during the pandemics, not only we have more work in university, but we also have to study more, learn more about technologies to communicate, information technology, and had twice as much to work beyond mediation, planning, assessment, and also create material, create documentation and research materials that could be, further made available." So I felt this solitude, a lot of work, and I accepted one more challenge, the one of writing this entry to the dictionary, and it was an honor, a gift. It was a bibliographic research. I consider that Carolina Maria de Jesus already has her entry in Wikipedia. She's a writer who is so much studied worldwide. There is so much work about her, scientific articles, videos, PhD theses, films about her, undergoing inquiries about her. And during this meeting, this re-encounter, I dived into her life when she was describing in Quarto de Despejo about her barracão full of mud on the river, alongside the Tietê River, in this periphery, this outskirt where Favela Carimbé was built. And she's saying about, she's talking about her experience, her personal issues, and her neighborhood, and that social nucleus to which she belonged. She starts with the minimum issues, the more intimate, and she says that hunger is yellow. And for me, it's so hard to understand this concept. Only if you ever experience hunger, It's not this sensation of hunger that we feel between meals, And also the clarity that hunger brings in the human being regarding the social economics and politics. And you start to ask yourself, who does she think she is, to, criticize government and politics like this? And I started, to feel so thrilled. I see Carolina as a woman, as a little kid, as a note lady. And the little girl suddenly in Sacramento, Minas Gerais, where she was born, she has 7 siblings. She studied at the first spiritual school, the Sacramento School, and she was a listener of her grandfather's stories, who was for sure an African griot in Brazilian lands. And that moved her and created in her this desire of telling stories and writing stories. And people were always asking her, where did you come from with this? Where did you get this desire of writing and telling stories? And she was so important to, the writing. When she met Arnaldo Dantas, the journalist, and he looks at her, how come a woman like her can have such a posture living in a place like this? She went to interview and to, uh, see and try to understand the favela that was growing there. And he got like scared, he was like, she saw that queen of the favela going around that land full of mud. And we noticed all these elements in Quarto de Despejo. And I saw so much of myself in Carolina. I was talking to someone today, I think it was Sandra. Favorite my favorite poetry is from Cora Coralina in Goiás. There are so many projects, this highlighting Cora Coralina and making her big in Goiás. And I think that in Brazil, in most parts of Brazil, or at least in some parts of it, we are more Carolinas than Coralina. And if I think about my childhood, about my grandmother that was a cleaner, a washer, that was washing clothes, and if I think about myself, we're all Carolinas. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Renata, for your presentation. I would like just to talk about some issues when we say when you tell your story, we hear these words that sing, that dance, and these words become body, become experience. And with the biography that you just presented, we have some elements that make us reflect, first of all, about the importance of the memory of Black women and the legacy that they have left to us. Because nowadays we talk about cultural studies in Latin America, but nobody wants to study these women. And these are the ones who, plant the seeds for this different perspective. And you have a speech of a woman coming from the outskirts. And we are talking about subordinated people. I'm not subordinated to anyone, and I don't want to be. But we are talking about resistance and how we can, from these micro narratives of the lives of these women, we can universalize the knowledge. And we are not alone in a universe, not only one center. The history is not completed until we start to assimilate the knowledge of the other centers, the other diasporic Africas. So thank you, because the importance of the narrative, of the inductive method, it's important. It's a life that is built on a network. This life of Black women, African women, women from Terreiros, we are not alone. And when you start asking permission for the younger and the older, I think this is so potent, because when we realize that importance of the generations, it's so important to retrieve the values and the importance of listening to these stories. And in the end, you talk about the queen. I think all of us are queens. From queens, we switched to slaves, to babas, to babysitters, and to workers. So we have to retrieve the speech, the posture, the body gestures of the Black women. And these are tools that we have to resist. And let's pass the floor to Professor Adria Borges Figueira Cerqueira, who will also present some aspects of Carolina Maria de Jesus, talking about the process of building, of the story itself, and we already have some elements, and about the resilience to rebuild from the diasporic Africa.
Good afternoon. I'm Adria, and it came to my mind Ijongo from the city of Goiás. That always starts with the opening choir. That's what I'd like to do it right now. The opening choir. I ask the owners of the house, I ask you to speak and to get in. So I ask my ancestors to speak and to be here. So we are coming from Goiás, and we can see that Goiás, we have a lot of representatives here. I'd like to thank Rosinaldo and Thais for the invitation, for this publication, which is so important for us. And I also thank at this moment, FLUP, the existence of FLUP. It's a resistance space that is so valuable to all of us. So I'm extremely moved and thankful for this group, this grouping, such a powerful one. And also Renata and Rosinalda for sharing the writing of this entry about Carolina Maria de Jesus. Rosinalda has already told about the process of writing. And we are also answering about the legacy of these women. And there's no way of not bringing the diaspora. All of us that live in this context, we have a series of traumas and pains, but we also bring our capacity, the capacity to dance in this world, giving responses to the colonizing processes. So this experience of this dialogue with Carolina Maria de Jesus in writing the entry, it brings a great contribution for me in many spaces, spaces of struggle, spaces of affection, because it's an invitation to visit the story of a writer that is very important to all of us, a Black woman that was accused by the press of being competent. Her writings couldn't be considered literature. And when we get into her literature, we get fascinated with the strength and the potential that we see there. It says Zosimo Bulbul also in the Black cinema. And I extend that arts in general, and I'm connecting with the visual arts, more recently the literature. But arts are, for us, a possibility also in this conception of Zosima, of having also a weapon in our hands so that we can elaborate the counter-narratives contrary to this patriarchal, racist, and misogynist narratives. And if, in fact, these arts are weapons, we have all of them always on our hands. And this assures our survival. So I was wondering that to bring a dictionary of entangled stories of diaspora women, which is the proposal of this dictionary, it's just the first volume, we're going to have other one, is the possibility of rescuing, recovering, and giving visibility to the knowledge Afro-diaspora knowledge. And Renata, she is very incisive and very provocative. In the city of Goiás, we have the importance of Cora Coralina, but we also have the importance of Carolina Maria and Leodegária de Jesus, that it's also a Black writer, Black author from Cidade de Goiás, that it's invisible. So we are composing this group of people that is trying to presentify, give visibility to Carolina Maria de Jesus and the importance of her work. So there are many sentences of Carolina that really moved me when I had contact with her work. For example, who invented the hunger was the ones that eat. The important is to be aware of it, to be someone in the world. The spectacle of the poor is to be able to eat. The dazzling of the hunger is what makes us shake. So we have to visualize the capacity that Carolina had of diminishing the strength of the colonial narrative and to bring us a social critic. It's also a sociological work criticizing the capitalistic system and also the social exclusion that we see in the cities, and also to criticize this condition of living in a favela, in a slum. She has a synthesis capacity. So this is a denounce of a reality that people want to hide. And she presents to the world making the social analysis critics. Social analysis and critics. So I always thought about Yaya Semba, that she says, I'm going to learn how to read, to teach my comrades. Carolina Maria de Jesus has taught me a lot, because as she put herself as a writer denouncing the social reality, I'm one of the persons that learn a lot with her with this contact. So I don't want to take too long because I want to pass the floor to my colleagues in the panel. So I'd like to thank all of you and conclude talking about the importance of the initiative of a work like this. And let's have the next entries and volumes and have the possibility of being here at FLUP having other dialogues. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Adria. I'm not going to talk too much. I just am going to emphasize what she said about the hunger. It's a political issue that we should not forget. Today, we are in the academy in a position of privilege. So I think that what we are doing here is not to forget where we come from and having a political dimension that we have, and we cannot forget that half of the world is hungry, more than half of the world. The African continent has no water, and so this is a fundamental part that we cannot forget. So thank you very much, Professor Adria. Now I'm going to pass the floor to Jennifer Manueli. She's going to talk about our great Maria Conceição Evaristo.
Boa tarde a todos. Peço licença.
Good evening, everyone. Ask your permission to speak. As my colleague Renata said about the responsibility, I also feel I have the same place. When we talk about ancestrality of the place where we came from, this really moves me. Because Conceição Evaristo, Carolina Maria de Jesus, they are black women from Minas Gerais, and it was in this geography that I was born. But it was not where I stayed for a long time. So I acknowledged myself in the narratives exactly by perceiving and living my similarities. I'm Jennifer, I'm a professor in Brasilia. I live in Tonaltina, the oldest region of the Federal District, since I was 11. But I also greet the state of Goiás, who gave me the possibility of having my graduation. It was a distant dream. I'm the only person in my family that graduated in a public university. So talking a little bit about my writing process, Conceição Evaristo is in my life since 2016. That was when I entered the university, and I had a discipline that made a connection between literature and racism. And it was at this moment that I got really emotional. And with the cover of this book, I completed my face. As you can see, there's just one side of my face, as if we had to complete the other side. So I started studying her works in my conclusion work and in the master thesis in the University of Londrina, when I received the invitation to take part of this opportunity. So this is my second time here at FLUPI. In 2020 it was online, and I was having my passage right, my rite of passage. We were facing pandemics, distant from the others, and together with the process of my writing the thesis, I wrote Conceição Evaristo's entry with my co-author, Amanda Crispim, who organizes the most recent work of Carolina Maria de Jesus. So, first of all, this encounter was through these connections of black women from Minas Gerais. And each time I read her works, I could visualize my ancestors, my grandfather telling me stories, like Chicotó told stories to Conceição Evaristo. And in this sense, I tried to give life to the entry, so as not to be too technical, but highlighting the poetical sensibility that is so characteristic of Conceição Evaristo's works. So, to conclude, I believe that the most significant part is precisely to have lived this moment of pain, writing the entry, together with a personal process that marks this entanglement of writings and experiences that turns more difficult the separation between subject and object of research. So that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. We are so happy. We have this intergeneration joy that we can perceive. The important is who is producing a text and what are we talking about the body, the textuality that passes through our body and our experience. So based on our culture and our ancestrality, so important for us. Thank you very much for bringing Conceição Evaristo's entry that I can synthesize woman, wisdom, wisdom, woman. So now I invite Professor Iralene Soares da Silva. She's going to introduce to us Esperança Garcia. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and to be moved by all of you, but above all, for listening the stories. I'm Iralene Soares, and I'm always affirming myself with the name and surname. I'm from Pernambuco, from the northern zone of Pernambuco. And who is from the northern part of Pernambuco? So that's what we call.
And ladies that were taking care and caring with an open smile. And all of you that know me, you know that when someone comes to me sad, the first thing I do is give a hug because I believe in the healing power of hugs. And what I have to tell about my half century of life is that I met Esperança in 2004. And Esperança, when I arrived in Piauí, and she has always been an inspiration for me because when I think of a woman aged 19, you know, that became insurgent in the process, this was so interesting and big for me. a woman that rebelled herself. And when Rose invited me to write and to create an entry to this work that I consider revolutionary because we need to bring out our voices and stories and memories, I felt so emotional and I felt so big, with this responsibility of bringing Esperanza to the hall of where we find many amazing women. Esperanza was born in the 18th century, 1700s, in the countryside of the Piauí state, the northeast of Brazil. And what made me feel actually about Esperanza in a very careful way were some texts that I was reading about her, about the letter of the slave. And I said, slave? No, because when she wrote the letter, she said she was not a slave anymore. She broke the chains as many other women did. And that stimulated me to write and think about Esperanza from Piauí. And when I accepted this challenge, I wrote an article and I wrote other things about Esperanza, and I started with the entry. In the midst, in 2018, I participated at a poetic soiree with students from high school and universities, and I had this student, Monica. She wrote a poetry about Esperanza, and that made me feel, that boosted me to work. How could Esperanza arrive in the deepest of the soul of this little girl, touched her in a way that she brought a poetry about her to me? And this girl has already taken her bachelor degree, and I am here. And by listening and reading other narratives from the proposed book, I thought of how big is this, and why do I use the word big? Because what we want the most as professors is to see our students as historical subjects taking part in public spaces, private spaces, poetic soirees, being considered as subjects to whom can be granted, financial funds for any other, proposals. And Esperanza for me goes beyond everything and beyond all the good things that I already know about her. She arrives to the contemporary period. She opening doors to other women, such as Monica, Beatriz. She arrives in my life like this. So this writing was full of responsibility, talking, having conversations with Esperanza. I have a letter that she wrote in 1770 in a list of enslaved people working with cotton that is in the public bibliothèque, the Federal Bibliothèque. And we have other narratives in Piauí, in Maranhão, people talking when we ask them, have you ever heard of her? What do you know about her? People start telling stories that there are often, related to each other, and she is very present in the memory of everyone in those places, children and other people. So I had a lot of listening to other people, listening to myself. What's Esperanza for me? What does she bring to me as a woman and as a little girl? Because if you were 19 years old, you were a little girl. So as a little girl, what does she bring to us in terms of reflection, legacy? What has she left to us? So I start writing to her about her from this reflexive moment and perspective, you know? And within this context of thinking about Esperanza and thinking about her from this trajectory as a woman, a black woman, I start to gather documents and start to reflect on Esperanza and Catarina Mina, thinking about how important it is and how important they are for us historians, for this third and fourth generation of historians. What's the importance that they have for us, for these subjects, for us to, revisit the story of slavery in Brazil? Because this story is very important in terms of legal, in terms of law, in terms of social development, politics, but it also has this historical importance in terms of thinking about memories and historiography. It's a rethink about the historiography. And what's the story that we tell about Brazil when we have Esperanza that in the 18th century said no, a very strong no, and, uh, showing herself, as a literate, alphabetized person. Her letter was the first petition written by an enslaved woman, and this is very big for a 19-year-old girl. So we have to think about Esperanza as an esperanza, which means hope. Think about her. Rethink about Brazilian history and the non-existence of women like her. The legacy that she leaves to us beyond this hope that we have, beyond this young generation that starts to read what we write, is this hope for change. And see Esperanza Gracia not only here in events such as these with us Afrodiasporic women, but in schools, in books for kids, in universities. That's what we want. That's what we're looking for when we are together, when we gather together. But the strength of this material, we hope for this. So Esperanza is this woman who will give to us as a legacy the hope for a better moment, a better day, better days for all of us with all the smiles and hugs that we deserve. So I'm going to stop here and give the opportunity to my colleagues. I thank you all, especially Rosie and Thais. I thank you so much for this opportunity of being here. Last year was last time in 2021 online, and today personally. And I congratulate each of you that wrote beautifully about our women. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Iraneide, for your presentation. I think this is a challenge that we have, not to forget the knowledge of our older women. I think that we have a huge legacy, and we are celebrating Professor Evaristo, but we have so many others, and we should pay a little more attention to this oral tradition. Thank you to teach us a new verb to hope, esperançar, and I'm gonna invent another one, which is not mine, so I'm not inventing, it's an old thing, which is coracionar, from coração, hope in Portuguese. And this is an invitation for us to move on coracionando, having heart, putting heart, because it's our legacy, no one else's legacy. And now I invite you, Professor. Oh my God. Who's next? I ran out of battery. We ran out of battery, guys. So good afternoon, all of you. I am Marley Silva. I'm so happy to be here. I'm from Pará. I'm from a city called Baitetuba, and inside I am one of the I belong to one of the 72 islands, and I used to, create stories, re-elaborate stories, and I became a historian myself. My state has 79% of the population that self-declares black, but the memory in terms of, classrooms, didactic books, and contact with historians about the Afrodiasporic women and black women, these stories are that are in a certain extent silenced and not well elaborated. And I have produced this entry that is called Mariana Cora or Mariana Mira. And I didn't want to write about Mariana. I was in this process researching. I was researching on something else, numeric things, another type of work. And I was researching on the 18th century, the first half. And in the first half, I found Dona Mariana, Mrs. Mariana, who was already enslaved. And I was reading that document that I came across several times. And it used to say there was an old lady and in the 1700s, and she was looking for justice. And I was like, oh my God, doesn't she see that justice wasn't meant for her at that time? So I would like to, I was getting angry, and I wanted to deal with that story of, remembering old women, that stories that are also related to politics, to education, to citizenship, and with freedom. This woman used to say that every human being should be free. And she's going to the court in Pará to get her freedom. Mariana, as Mina or Cora, as described in this document, she was from Togo, and in 1778, she had the resources in Belém do Pará to buy her freedom. And I believe that in this moment, in 1738, she had this, network of support in that city that was becoming urban and getting bigger. And in my idea, I think she had this network of support that allowed her to have the resources to buy her freedom. But this old man with whom she lived, and I was, judging, and I was feeling very angry. I was not a historian anymore at that moment. How come she's there and she's asking for freedom? She's gonna suffer. Why is she doing this? Because justice is so slow. And why is she going to court? It's slow. So I was fighting with myself because I didn't want to write about her, because this was not my research theme. But I was so anxious, and I was so intrigued, and I started to research. And she tried with her landlord, with the man she was living with the court, and she couldn't get it. She couldn't be successful, and she was moving on in all the legal steps for her freedom. And I remember that year, 1738, this very justice at that time that made me so angry. And I started to judge her because she was not understanding that this was not going to work for her at that time. And she started to, try to use this justice. And then by reading further, I see that in Pará, this Mariana was the first woman to go to the court, to go to the justice, to the federal to the local justice, to gain her freedom. And we know that the full citizenship for black citizens, it's still a struggle in the present. But if you think about Pará back then, You know, when you think about that story about freedom, about citizenship, about Black women that are in a domestic environment, but are also talking to this more broadened universe to gain citizenship and freedom. But I must remember Mariana Corá, Mariana Mina, and this dictionary serves to this proposal, serves to this purpose so well, because it activates this memory of wonderful women that in the past and the present are building on their narratives and other ways of living and of being. So I thank you all. I hope you buy the dictionary and use it in the different spaces you are. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Marley, for your passionate presentation. Everybody was moved by it. And I think this passes through generations. When you bring us the story of Mariana, I really don't have anything to do but thank you that the youngsters continue with this passion that we need for this connection between generations. So I'm going to call Professor Maria Lima, who is going to talk about Salustra. Good afternoon to all. I like to thank Rosinalda and Thais for the invitation, for the marvelous opportunity of taking part of this dictionary with so many wonderful women that wrote biographies of even more incredible women. But I also would like to thank a person that is not present here in body, but it is in soul, Solange Rocha, because she indicated my name to Thais, and Thais contacted me to talk about these women and to write their biographies. I just would like to clear out, they put Maria Lima, but sometimes I have difficulty in identify myself as Maria Limas because we are 7 Marias in my family. So, and I am Maria da Vitória, Vitória or Toya. Toya, of course, when my sisters want something from me. So Maria is Maria de Jesus. So that's why I have some difficulties to act when I listen to Maria Lima. I take a little bit more. The other thing is, why did I choose Salustya? When people ask me, I didn't choose her. She chose me. She chose me because, in reality, we are a group that studies the social history of slavery in Paraíba, that today we call African diaspora. And even coming from Piauí, I spent most part of my life in Paraíba. Few years ago, I returned to my homeland, and I'm starting to learn something about the story of my state. But I know a lot more this history of Paraíba, Black women from Paraíba of the 19th century. So Salustya chose me because we formed a group, Professor Luciano Mendonça, that today is a professor in UFCG. And when I was a substitute teacher, some students were part of this study group, but especially the 3 of us, because we were trying to break this long period of not writings about the diaspora, African diaspora in Paraíba, in the state of Paraíba. One of the last works was written in the 70s. So we were the first group to start writing theses and works. And we were the first to have the PhD, to get our PhD in this topic. So, of course, that we are not going to account for all the archives that we had to visit. So we had our meeting and we decided which archives we would research on. I am part of the historical archives in Paraíba because usually I am there. So when I go back there, even if I'm distant, far away now, I receive a lot of visitors. I explain what documents are there, accessible there. So I was responsible for this documentation, an incredible one, a historical documentation together with the Fundação José Américo. And Luciano left Paraíba and went to the Historical and Archaeological Foundation of Pernambuco. And we changed all the documentation. In this exchange, I was responsible for identifying this documentation and forward to each one of them what we managed to have. Luciano chose what he wanted to work with. Also Solange, I had chosen another part of the documentation for the doctorship. And my thesis was specifically to work with the different sides of liberty. And in this, we have the freedom documentation about Salluste. No Solange, neither Luciano. Salluste didn't introduce herself to them, even if she was there in the documentation. So we have each of these documents in our archives. So she introduced herself to me at this moment, at that moment. So I was really amazed, got amazed, because I started writing with the meaning of freedom, and I already was thinking about what to build with this freedom action of Salluste. So through this perspective, when I start the transcription of the document, I understand that this is incredible because it's an enslaved woman that gets to know from other persons that she didn't have a registration made by her owner, so she refuses to continue under the same roof of this owner. She doesn't admit to continue, and she leaves. She leaves the property. It was a sugar mill of Mamanguape, Paraíba. It's a very rich region and producer of sugar. So she leaves the sugar mill and she goes to the orphans department. She says that she wants a lawyer, a representative, and that she wants her freedom. So the judge and the lawyer attends to her in this request because she refuses to go back to the owner's house because she considers herself a free woman, as a free woman. So the orphan's judge starts to investigate her story. So her process starts with this freedom action against her owner because she wasn't registered in the right term. So she feels she is a free woman. And the legislation in 1871 allows this to any enslaved person. And the orphan's judge looks for the documentation and he discovers that there's no Salluste registered in the municipality or in the nearby regions. So he attends her request to obtain the freedom letter and also the process for the judge, for the regional judge, right, which is in a superior level. But the regional judge makes another understanding. He says, but in the documentation, there is a salustio. It's a man, but it could be a mistake of the man who wrote. Instead of putting an A, put an O, and instead of putting female gender, may put male gender. So in my point of view, she was registered. And he refuses this idea that Salustio is free, that she cannot, so this way she cannot have her freedom. So her process goes to another instance in Recife, Pernambuco, because in Paraíba they don't have a court, and it goes to a superior court. When the process is distributed, in a first moment, they make again this study. Before the final result, what the owner said was that he gives the freedom letter to Sallusti, saying that it's a free letter without any kind of costs, that she doesn't have to do anything. There's no conception regarding this, and no costs. She doesn't have to pay anything to him, because he blames the person that sold Sallusti to him as being the responsible for her having to be for many years without a registration. So in an illegal situation of slavery, he wanted to get rid of another process that would be the process of keeping in a enslaved condition, a person that should be free. So this was what was going on in the relation court. So this process ends with Sallustia obtaining her freedom letter. But what is very strong for us is that since the region is a very rich one, this owner is an extremely powerful one. She didn't fear. She kept herself decided in her proposal that she was a free woman and that she should continue free. Because we have many other cases that we have in the region of Mamanguape, situation in which enslaved person didn't get their freedom, especially black women. Free black women that were kept in illegal situation of slavery. So what stays with us is her strength in keeping her faith in her idea, in her condition of free woman. Of course, there is the possibility of finding more information about her. We made a process of digitalization of some documents, Mamanguape Forum, but we now have 700, 800 documents. But we just scratched a little bit of this documentation, of the end of the 18th century. We still have so much to do, to study, to think in other ideas, and even giving continuity and arriving until the moment that she receives the freedom letter. So I think it's a little bit this. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Professor Maria da Vitória, for your presentation. Look at how small the world is. An M for an F. It's a small mistake. That's how they erase us from history. And that's why we celebrate this dictionary